Hi there, my name's Simon, and if you run a podcast or if you're thinking about running a podcast yourself, then you probably know how to speak into a microphone already. But chances are the guests who you bring onto your podcast episodes, they may well not know the right ways to speak into a microphone. So having recorded over 800 roughly episodes on different podcasts, I thought that I'd share with you some of the best practice, common techniques that I use when I'm talking to guests on a podcast episode before we hit record to make sure that we get the best quality recording from them. Now, in this video, we're going to look at 5 different common microphones that guests tend to use on a podcast recording. We're going to look at a trusty laptop microphone. So I've got a MacBook Pro here, but it could be any kind of laptop. We're going to look at using AirPods because quite often guests turn up to a podcast recording using AirPods. We've got the Samson Q2U, which is virtually the same as the ATR 2100 for the sake of this demonstration at least. We've got the trusty Blue Yeti that a lot of people have, and if your guest thinks that they know anything at all about recording audio with decent quality, then they may well have one of these in their cupboard that they bring out for a podcast recording. And then lastly, as a little bonus, we're going to look at using a smartphone as a recording device, because a lot of people tend to knock these as being not very good, but actually the quality you can get from these can be really quite outstanding these days. That's going to be at the end, but let's jump into this video right now. So just a 10-second backstory so that you know who I am. I run a business managing podcasts for other people, but quite often they want someone to present their podcast on their behalf. So that's quite often what I do. I present podcast episodes on behalf of other people who have their own podcast channel. That's how I've managed to record over 800 different episodes, and that's how I've managed to speak to so many different podcast guests. Okay, let's jump into it and look first of all at the traditional laptop microphone that a lot of guests will turn up to a podcast to use. The thing about a laptop microphone is that they tend to pick up audio from all around the room because they're not designed to be like this microphone here is, which is pointing straight at my mouth. So this microphone here is picking up noise from 360 degrees. That means that you need your guest to be in as close as possible to it. Let me just demonstrate here by speaking into this microphone at a traditional kind of distance that people tend to speak into a microphone if they're on a podcast recording. Now, if they're here or if they're back here, you can probably tell that the audio sounds a little bit thin. It's not that good quality, but if somebody comes in much closer like this, then it's going to really improve the sound quality that you're getting from them. Now, okay, for the sake of this demonstration, I'm having to lean right the way in, but it's not very comfortable to do that. So the best thing is to ask your guest just to bring their laptop closer to them, or even to put it on a few books to raise it up in height so that their mouth is closer to it. This is a really important thing to do because quite often your guests will think that because they can hear their own voice just fine, they forget that other people might not necessarily be able to hear it. Now, this is a MacBook Pro, and it's a relatively new MacBook Pro as well. But if somebody's using something like a 10-year-old Dell laptop, then the microphones built into those are going to be nowhere near as good. So it's even more important to get people in nice and close. Now, that's a laptop microphone. Quite often, though, people will turn up to a podcast recording with a set of AirPods just like these. Now, the thing is with AirPods like these, it's great when people have these plugged into their ears because then you don't get your audio coming out through speakers, which can then get picked up by their microphone. So when your audio goes straight into their ears, that is a really, really good thing. However, the microphones on these are absolutely dreadful. Trust me, I love Apple products. I love pretty much every Apple product that there is, but the microphones on AirPods, just no good at all. Now, quite often when you say to a guest that the microphones on these are not very good, they go, oh, sorry, and they start to take them out. He's like, no, leave them in, but just change the microphone setting on your laptop. If you're using Riverside with them or Zoom or whatever it is, keep their speaker as being the AirPods that they've got in their ears already, but just ask them to change the microphone to something else. Maybe to change the microphone to being the laptop microphone so that their audio is being picked up by the microphone in their laptop, but they're still hearing you through the AirPods. And then that way you don't get your audio coming out and getting picked up by their microphone. And just a quick thing, actually, given the fact that we are talking about microphones and these are earphones as well as microphones, whatever people are using, if you've got the option for them to use any kind of earphones, it doesn't have to be AirPods, it could be just normal plug-in earphones or over-the-top headphones, then that's always a really, really good thing to do. Okay, next up on our list is the Samson Q2U, and I've said I'm mixing it in with the ATR 2100. They look very similar, they sound very similar, they're priced at a very similar price point, and what you might want to do is, I've done this quite a lot actually, is if you want your guest to have good quality audio, and if you're thinking that they may have some kind of shockingly old laptop that they're going to be recording their side of the podcast recording on, then I've shipped these to clients in the past, usually just by going straight onto Amazon, ordering it to be shipped directly to their address wherever they're going to be making the recording from. They're so simple to use because they are just plug it straight into a USB, but do remember that if somebody is using, for example, a newer MacBook Pro that's only got USB-C ports, then these don't generally come with a USB-C cable, so they will need some kind of an adapter to go with it. Sometimes people don't realize that until the last minute, then they're not actually able to use the device that you've shipped to them. Now, if somebody does have something like a Samson Q2U, then it comes with a plastic stand, which is great, but quite often when it's on a desk, it's a little bit too low. It's a little bit flimsy, but it's going to be okay most of the time. But I'd always ask them to just get a couple of books and just to prop that up a little bit and then to have that in front of them like that. Ask them, though, not to have it directly in front of them. You'll notice, this is also Samson Q2U here, I don't have this directly in front of me, partly because it would block the camera view, but also mainly because if you're speaking straight into it like this, then you can pick up some of your breath on here, which is not a very good sound. So I'd always have it just off to one side a little bit, and then it'll pick up their audio just great without picking up their breath at the same time. It's really important to ask people to position these properly because quite often people who don't work in the field of audio, this is totally understandable because it's not what they do from one day to the next, but they'll just kind of imagine that because they've got a microphone and it's plugged in and it's switched on, they can kind of have it anywhere on their desk. It doesn't really matter which direction it's pointing in, doesn't matter how close to them it is. It's going to pick up good quality audio. They're not even thinking about good quality audio. And fair enough, really, because they've come onto your podcast. They're probably just going to be thinking about how they sound with the content that they're talking about. So asking them to at least turn it around and have it in the right direction is a really good thing. Pointing in the right direction like that, but also quite close in. I normally demonstrate that when I'm talking to them, I'm literally about that far away from my microphone. Sometimes it's quite hard for people to tell. You know, if you're looking from that direction there through an online recording, it's quite hard for people to tell how far you are from the microphone. So I'll usually demonstrate by saying my mouth is about that far away from my microphone. And then they'll kind of realize that if theirs is over there and they're about that far away, it's like, there's a big difference between the two. Sound quality gets exponentially better the closer to a microphone you get, to a point. You don't want to be too close, of course, but there's a massive difference between a microphone being here and a microphone being here. In fact, I'll demonstrate with this one here that's plugged in. At the moment, this is me talking at a nice kind of distance, but if I just come back to about here and I'm about that kind of distance that I was just looking at away, then it changes it quite dramatically. Right, next up on our list is the trusty Blue Yeti, and this is a great microphone for people to use. Sometimes people think that because the Blue Yeti has got microphones going all the way around, all you need to do is just set it on the all the way around microphone setting and it'll just pick up your voice really quite nicely. The trouble is, it will pick up everything else that's going on in the room as well. If a bus goes past outside the window, it's going to pick that sound up as well. If a dog's barking, it's going to pick that up. So it's always good to ask them to switch it to the cardioid setting, but don't mention the word cardioid because they're not going to know what that is. If you just say, the second from right, it looks like an upside down heart. People get that every single time. The other thing to say to them is that above that dial, there's another dial that says gain, and if you just turn that so it's pointing to about 9 o'clock, pointing west, then again, they understand that. If they do that, then you need to say to them, now turn the microphone around so that the red light is facing towards you. Then you'll know that their microphone is facing in the right direction and they're not going to be speaking into the back of it. But the other thing with the Blue Yeti is that pretty much everybody tends to angle it so it's pointing straight to their mouth like this, which is exactly the same as this. But the Blue Yeti, the microphones are on the side like this, especially when it's on the cardioid. It's at the side and at the front. So I usually say to people, the microphone part is just above the red light. So instead of having it pointing towards you like that, just place it on the desk and then have it pointing straight up like that. And then again, pop it on some books so you're about that far away from it. And if people do that, then their sound quality is going to be absolutely perfect. Now, what happens if you're recording on Riverside or on Zoom or something like that and all goes bad and their microphone setup is just dreadful all around? Well, most people do have a smartphone in their pocket and it's perfectly possible to make a decent recording on this. In fact, I'm just going to demonstrate with this right now. On an iPhone, you get a voice memos app, and the voice memos app is very similar to on an Android. I'm not quite familiar with that. I think it's called a voice recorder or something like that. But the idea is that it just records voice in a very straightforward way. So the thing to do, because the microphones on a phone are at the bottom, is to ask people to go into that app and then to turn the phone upside down and then just to hold it just like this, hold it close to their chest, because then they'll kind of carry on talking to you. They'll forget that they're holding it, which is kind of what you want them to do. You don't want them holding it and it getting in the way. You don't want them just hitting record and then putting it on the desk over there. You just want them to hold it around about like this. Now, let me go and hit record on mine. And this is now recording on mine. You can probably tell there is a difference between this audio and this audio right here. but it's not going to be dramatic. It's not going to be horrendous or anything like that. And if there's a whole podcast recording and somebody's recorded it using their iPhone or whatever phone they've got, then so long as it's not like a 10-year-old smartphone or some kind of Nokia from 2007, then the recording on there is going to be really quite peachy. Now, that's all good, but you might be thinking to yourself, Simon, why are you showing us these options here when a lot of podcasters will use something like the Shure SM7B microphone or something like that? Well, yeah, a lot of podcast hosts will use those microphones, but not many guests tend to use those microphones, only because it's not what they do from one day to the next. So typically when guests turn up to a podcast recording, it's one of these 5 options that they tend to have. So I hope that helps, but if you have any questions, please just drop it in the comments. But in the meantime, thank you for watching this video, and bye for now.